The crowd inside the massive theater buzzed with excitement long before the cameras started rolling. Fans waved glowing signs, whispered predictions, and held their phones high, desperate to capture every second of what promised to be one of the biggest nights in America's Got Talent history. The judges sat behind the iconic desk beneath the dazzling lights, exchanging casual jokes while the audience roared around them. Simon Cowell looked relaxed but slightly tired, as if he had already seen everything possible after years of judging performers from around the world. Then the host stepped onto the stage and smiled. "Tonight," he announced dramatically, "we have a very special guest all the way from the Philippines." The crowd erupted instantly. Backstage, Vice Ganda stood quietly in front of a mirror while assistants adjusted the sparkling details on the performer's outfit. Normally, Vice Ganda radiated confidence, humor, and unstoppable energy. But tonight felt different. The comedian, television icon, and performer took a deep breath and pressed trembling hands together. "Are you nervous?" a producer asked softly. Vice Ganda laughed nervously. "Very nervous. This stage is different." The producer smiled. "You've performed in front of millions." "Yes," Vice Ganda replied, staring at the reflection in the mirror, "but tonight I want them to see my heart." Moments later, the stage manager signaled it was time. As the doors opened, the roar of the AGT audience grew louder and louder until it sounded like crashing waves. Vice Ganda stepped onto the stage wearing a shimmering silver outfit that reflected every beam of light in the theater. The audience exploded with cheers, especially the Filipino fans scattered throughout the crowd waving tiny flags and crying with excitement. Simon leaned forward immediately. "Well," he said with a grin, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." The audience laughed. Vice Ganda bowed dramatically. "Simon, if I'm going to embarrass myself tonight, I might as well look expensive doing it." Even Simon burst into laughter. Howie Mandel shook his head. "I already love this." Sofia Vergara clapped excitedly. "You are fabulous." Vice Ganda smiled warmly before suddenly becoming serious. "I know many people know me as someone who makes people laugh," the performer began softly. "But tonight, I want to tell a story." The room became quiet almost instantly. "I grew up in the Philippines in a small home where life was not always easy. We didn't have much money. Sometimes we didn't even know if we would have enough food the next day. But my mother always told me something very important." Vice Ganda paused, eyes glistening. She said, "If life hurts you, make the world smile anyway." The audience applauded gently. Simon nodded slowly, clearly interested now. "So tonight," Vice Ganda continued, "I want to dedicate this performance to everyone who ever felt invisible, everyone who used laughter to hide pain, and everyone who kept dreaming even when life told them to stop." A silence settled over the theater. Then the music began. At first, nobody understood what was happening. A single piano note echoed through the room. Vice Ganda stood motionless under a dim spotlight, eyes closed. The crowd expected comedy, maybe a hilarious routine or playful song. Instead, a haunting melody filled the theater. And then Vice Ganda started singing. The first line came out soft, emotional, and heartbreakingly sincere. The audience froze. Simon's eyebrows lifted instantly. Nobody expected such a powerful voice. Vice Ganda sang with raw emotion, every word carrying years of struggle, hope, and hidden pain. The lyrics spoke about childhood dreams, rejection, loneliness, and the desperate need to be accepted for who you truly are. Cameras zoomed toward audience members already wiping tears from their eyes. The performance grew stronger with every second. The lighting shifted from soft blue to glowing gold as childhood photos appeared across the giant screen behind the stage. Images of crowded streets in Manila, old family photographs, and clips of young dreamers chasing impossible futures flashed one after another. Vice Ganda walked slowly across the stage while singing directly to the audience. Then something incredible happened. A choir hidden behind the stage suddenly joined the song. The theater erupted in goosebumps. The massive harmony lifted the performance into something unforgettable. It no longer felt like a talent show audition. It felt like a message to the entire world. Simon stared without blinking. Even Howie Mandel looked emotional. Sophia placed a hand over her heart. The song reached its chorus. Vice Ganda's voice soared through the theater with stunning power, causing the audience to leap to their feet before the performance had even ended. The applause became deafening. But Vice Ganda wasn't finished. Suddenly the music stopped. The theater went dark. For 2 seconds, there was complete silence. Then a spotlight revealed Vice Ganda standing alone at center stage. The performer looked directly at Simon Cowell. "When I was younger," Vice Ganda said quietly into the microphone, "people told me I would never belong anywhere." The audience listened carefully. They laughed at how I looked. They laughed at how I spoke. They laughed at my dreams. Vice Ganda smiled sadly. "But one day I realized something." Another pause. "The people who are different are often the people who change the world." Thunderous applause exploded again. Simon slowly nodded. Vice Ganda inhaled deeply. "And tonight, I stand here proudly as myself." The second song began instantly. This time the energy completely transformed. Drums thundered through the theater as dancers rushed onto the stage wearing glowing costumes inspired by Filipino culture mixed with modern pop style. The crowd screamed with excitement. Vice Ganda suddenly switched from emotional ballad singer to electrifying performer. The choreography was explosive. The visuals became breathtaking. Bright colors burst across the screens while fireworks shot upward behind the dancers. Every movement felt larger than life. Simon's jaw literally dropped. The audience could barely stay seated. Vice Ganda danced across the stage with unstoppable charisma, interacting with the crowd and judges while delivering flawless vocals. At one point, the performer walked directly toward Simon. "Simon!" Vice Ganda shouted playfully during the music. Simon pointed at himself in confusion. "Yes, you." Vice Ganda laughed. The crowd roared. Vice Ganda pulled Simon onto the stage. The audience absolutely lost their minds. Simon tried resisting at first, laughing nervously while millions watching at home screamed in excitement. "Oh no," Simon muttered. Vice Ganda handed him a sparkling microphone. "Tonight," Vice Ganda announced dramatically, "you are part of the performance." The crowd exploded. Simon laughed harder than anyone had seen in years. Music blasted through the theater while Vice Ganda playfully taught Simon simple dance moves. The audience screamed every time Simon awkwardly attempted the choreography. Even the judges stood up laughing. For a brief moment, the entire theater felt united. People weren't just watching a performance anymore. They were experiencing joy. Then, without warning, the mood shifted again. The music softened. Vice Ganda turned toward Simon. "Before you sit down," the performer said gently, "I want to thank you." Simon looked surprised. "For what?" Vice Ganda smiled. "For giving people around the world a chance to be seen." The audience applauded softly. Vice Ganda continued, "You may not realize it, but shows like this change lives. Somewhere out there is a young person who feels different, scared, and alone. But they watch this stage and think, maybe there's space for me too." Simon's expression suddenly changed. He looked genuinely emotional. Vice Ganda placed a hand over the heart. "And if my story helps even one person believe in themselves tonight, then every painful moment in my life was worth it." The theater fell silent. Simon looked down briefly before quietly saying, "Thank you." Vice Ganda hugged him. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Then the final performance began. A massive orchestra rose from beneath the stage. Gasps spread across the audience. Vice Ganda stood center stage as cinematic music filled the theater. The final song blended English and Filipino lyrics together in a beautiful anthem about resilience, identity, and hope. The visuals behind the stage transformed into scenes of ordinary people from different cultures smiling, crying, embracing family members, and chasing dreams. Every lyric hit harder than the last. Vice Ganda's voice cracked with emotion during the final chorus. Audience members openly cried. Even camera operators later admitted they struggled to stay focused because the atmosphere inside the theater felt overwhelming. As the song built toward its climax, thousands of tiny lights illuminated throughout the audience. Phone flashlights. One by one, soon the entire theater looked like a galaxy. Vice Ganda looked around in shock. Tears streamed down the performer's face. The orchestra swelled. The choir returned. And with one final breathtaking note, the performance ended. For a split second, there was silence. Then the entire theater exploded. The standing ovation was immediate. People screamed. People cried. People hugged strangers beside them. The applause became so loud it nearly drowned out the music still echoing through the speakers. Vice Ganda stood frozen in disbelief. Simon Cowell remained standing longer than anyone. When the cameras finally focused on him, viewers everywhere noticed tears in his eyes. The internet would later replay that moment millions of times. Vice Ganda covered the face with trembling hands. The audience chanted loudly, "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" Howie looked toward Simon. Sophia looked emotional. Heidi Klum smiled through tears. Simon slowly walked onto the stage. The crowd grew even louder. Vice Ganda looked stunned. Simon took a deep breath before speaking. "I have judged talent competitions for many, many years," he began. The audience quieted. "And honestly, it becomes very difficult to surprise me anymore." Simon paused. "But tonight," he shook his head slowly, "I witnessed something unforgettable." Applause erupted again. Simon turned toward the audience. This wasn't just singing. It wasn't just comedy. It wasn't just entertainment. He looked back at Vice Ganda. This was truth. Vice Ganda immediately started crying again. Simon continued, "You made people laugh. You made people dance. And somehow, at the same time, you made people feel seen." The audience applauded loudly. Simon smiled softly. "And that is very rare." Vice Ganda whispered, "Thank you." Simon looked down at the golden buzzer. Then he looked back up. "Normally, I think carefully before doing this." The audience screamed before he even touched it. But tonight, Simon slammed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti exploded across the theater. The crowd completely lost control. Vice Ganda collapsed to the floor crying. The judges rushed onto the stage while confetti rained endlessly from above. Filipino fans in the audience screamed with pride and joy. Some held each other while crying uncontrollably. Vice Ganda looked upward through the falling gold pieces, overwhelmed by emotion. The orchestra replayed the triumphant theme music while cameras captured every unforgettable second. Simon helped Vice Ganda stand up. "You earned this," he said sincerely. Vice Ganda struggled to speak. "All my life," the performer whispered through tears, "I only wanted people to know that being different is not something to hide." The audience applauded again. "And tonight," Vice Ganda continued, voice shaking, "I feel accepted." Simon hugged the performer once more. The moment instantly became one of the most emotional scenes in AGT history. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. People around the world reacted emotionally. Some called it the greatest AGT performance ever. Others shared personal stories about feeling different, misunderstood, or afraid to express themselves. Celebrities posted reactions online. Fans from the Philippines celebrated proudly. Hashtags connected to Vice Ganda began trending worldwide before the episode even finished airing. But backstage, away from the screaming crowd and flashing cameras, Vice Ganda finally sat quietly alone. The performer stared at the golden confetti still stuck to the outfit. A producer entered the room carefully. "Everyone is talking about you," she said with a huge smile. Vice Ganda laughed softly through tears. "I still can't believe it happened." The producer sat nearby. "You know what affected people the most." Vice Ganda looked up. "You were completely real." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Vice Ganda smiled gently. "When I was young," the performer said quietly, "I used to watch television and dream about stages like this." The producer nodded. "But I never imagined the world would actually listen to someone like me." The producer smiled warmly. "They listened tonight." Vice Ganda looked down at the golden buzzer sticker attached to the jacket. A long silence followed. Then the performer whispered something almost too soft to hear. "I hope somewhere out there, someone feels less alone now." Meanwhile, Simon Cowell sat backstage in another room replaying the performance on a monitor. One of the crew members entered. "You okay?" he asked. Simon nodded slowly. "That performance reminded me why this show matters," Simon admitted. The crew member smiled. "You were emotional." Simon laughed quietly. "Don't tell anyone." But of course, the entire world had already seen it. Over the next few days, the performance became a global sensation. Reaction videos appeared everywhere online. Fans uploaded clips of themselves crying during the final song. People praised Vice Ganda not only for incredible talent, but for representing millions of people who rarely see themselves celebrated on such a massive stage. Television hosts discussed the performance. Music producers offered opportunities. International celebrities shared supportive messages. And perhaps most importantly, thousands of fans began posting their own personal stories. Stories about bullying. Stories about rejection. Stories about surviving pain while learning to love themselves. Many wrote the same sentence repeatedly. Vice Ganda made me feel seen. Weeks later, when the AGT Live semifinals arrived, anticipation reached unbelievable levels. People lined up outside the theater hours early. Some flew from the Philippines just to watch in person. News reporters gathered outside asking fans one question. Can Vice Ganda possibly top the Golden Buzzer performance? Inside the theater, Simon sat quietly before the show started. Howie leaned toward him. You know tonight's audience is expecting a miracle. Simon smirked slightly. I think Vice Ganda likes impossible challenges. Backstage, Vice Ganda stood once again beneath the bright lights preparing to perform. But this time the nerves felt different. There was pressure now. Millions expected greatness. A stage assistant asked nervously, "Are you ready?" Vice Ganda inhaled deeply, then smiled. "No," the performer admitted honestly. The assistant laughed. "But I'm grateful." As the introduction began, Vice Ganda looked toward the stage entrance. The screams from the audience thundered louder than ever before. And just before stepping out, Vice Ganda whispered softly to the empty hallway. "For everyone who ever felt invisible, this is for you." The lights exploded. The crowd roared. And once again, Vice Ganda walked onto the AGT stage, not just as a comedian, singer, or television icon, but as a symbol of courage for millions watching around the world.